real quick question. When you first started there in 98, how many employees versus when you left in 2006? What was the employee growth like?
Yeah, at the moment there are like 200, but we started with a group of two actually in the US, which
Wow.
was 70% of the sales. And I believe we had about 25 people in Europe. Now, I understand that the business model was very interesting. It was that we did virtual production. So we would design the pump, we would invest in the tools. The tools would go to third-party molders, so that saved a lot of labor. They would bring the parts to us, and we had the know-how and technology to assemble the pump and then do the marketing job.
Excellent.
So that's why we had less people. But we grew quickly from probably about 25 people to about 120 in Holland, which was the main office. And here we grew to about 80 people.
Well, that's excellent. Now, what I gather from what you said is that one of the main things that caused your need to start thinking about new product development process was the commitment you made to the street. Is that the right? So you went public. That was the major inflection point. You made some commitments to the street, one new product a year, and that's really what drove the focus and attention on developing this new product process, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And what is really amazing is that it took us a while to get the process implemented. And I had created and launched a process like that at Philips Lighting early on, and implemented something similar at Sylvania, done the same thing at Kohler. So I brought that experience in. But what's interesting is that there was some resistance in the beginning. But once we got it going, and that came along with some culture and inspiration, and some other things like key elements like ownership and accountability, we actually delivered multiple products within a year. So in 2002, two we had available, in 2003, three. And that was really as a result of a pipeline of ideation that was then went into a structured organizational development process where we could prioritize every month what was most important based on our customer demand and customer interest. But these things would go in harmony and behind each other. And once we got that pipeline filled, we had multiple products coming out years later. So we started in 98, 99 with the process, and it really came to fruition 3 to 5 years later. The other thing which was significant is that we decided just one new product a year is not good enough, because sometimes there are line extensions, there are nuances of the basic pumps. So we decided to up the ante, and we ended up saying we want to do at least one breakthrough product every 5 years. And we added that to the challenge in 2004, and we accomplished that. And obviously, we could see the pipeline, and we knew what was in the works, but it was important to get a mindset organized that breakthrough innovation, which is much tougher, takes much longer, had to be set. A goal had to be set as well, and we accomplished that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. Your passion for innovation is significant, which is one of the things I really love. Let me ask you about the big company experience. You keyed in on your background with some very large, great companies, and we see that a lot with young entrepreneurs. Right? They go out and they hire someone who comes from a big company. Did you have any pain, or was there any significant issue for you coming in and running a small company where you got to get your hands dirty? Can you talk to some of our viewers about the difference between being in a big company and what you really have to watch out for coming to a smaller company?
That's an interesting question, because in my career I went from small to big to small. I had started with the Netherlands Chamber of Commerce helping exporters from the Netherlands come into the U.S., doing analysis and get them started. And that's actually, Airspray became one of my customers, and they ended up hiring me. So then I worked with Airspray in the mid-'80s and did some sales, and really two people, hands-on. You had to do everything. I then went to Philips as manager new products and got into the bigger environments. Ultimately was with Rexam, where my last role was running $1 billion division with 11,000 people and 24 plants. So I really experienced that all. I have to say that the change from large to small was absolutely fine, but it's all about personal commitment and making your hands dirty. You do not have an assistant or a secretary necessarily. You got to do things yourself. I actually was happy to jump on a fork truck to get trucks loaded in the early days of the plant in Pompano to get stuff out if that had to be done. I don't think that's hard. I think what's hard or harder is for people who have only been in a small company environment, and you come in from a larger company and you try to explain the process benefits and the necessity to benefit ultimately, because it's more structured. They feel they're limited, especially the creative team at times was really struggling with this,
Right.
because they want to have a lot of hobby time, unaccounted time, where you get productive creativity out of, but you have to have accountability, and that needs to be nearly scheduled in a sense. You can't schedule that, but what I'm saying is 75% of the time has to be dedicated to the committed project so you can deliver them on time, and yet you need to allow them some creativity to do their hobby projects.
Right.
But it's that kind of difference of approach that you need to try and convey, and I would get frustrated at times. Right? And that comes also along with the whole accountability and ownership part of it. I think accountability with bigger companies tends to be, I think, a little bit higher in that, you have a formal meeting, you have minutes, you have action points, you come back, things have to get done, otherwise you get in trouble with your boss. And in a smaller environment, that's all a little bit more, I would say, subjective, or could be easier.
Right.
And that sometimes can be costly in your development.
Yeah, you're singing my tune. Accountability, ownership, leadership. When you were going through the growth, obviously you're hiring lots of people. I'm assuming that you made a couple of bad hires, maybe, which is pretty typical. But what were the main pain points that you think you faced as you were going through this growth? Were there 2 or 3 that just kind of stick out in your brain as the real difficult ones, or the ones that hurt the most?
Yeah, absolutely. And we made quite a few errors in hiring, but that I would account that to inexperience. When you grow from a two people operation to 4 to 6, when you're very dependent on every individual that comes in to an organization of 50 to 100 people, it changes a lot. But yeah, we made some bad hires, and I think that is what, to me, that was attributable to being inexperienced in not understanding what to look for in the hiring process. And it doesn't matter how good you are in knowing what to look for, you can still make mistakes. But really, I would say digging through that and understanding what a person could bring. But ultimately, what it ended up in the early hires was really all about chemistry. Chemistry and finding the right people where they had the trust and confidence in you as a leader and what you were trying to build. And I had a great operational manager who came from a big operation, port operation, to become the logistical and distribution manager. And he made a big step down in size and responsibility, but he saw the opportunity, potential, and was excited. And that was probably one of my best hires ever. But I replaced him by a guy who we found once sleeping at the wheel. I'm serious. I mean, it's a tremendous up and down, I think. And unfortunately, it takes so much time. You hire them, you train them, then you lose them, you have to rehire. So I think taking time to hire, trying to really look for some best practices of how you do it, what kind of questions you need to ask. Don't hire too quickly, but ultimately let your gut tell you what you should do with individuals. I think in hindsight, my gut was always right, but that's that book Blink. You gotta, it accounts for something, but you need to take that into account somehow.
I totally agree. I mean, I've made those hires where in my gut I know going in, my gut's screaming at me, this is not right. But because you're growing, hair on fire, you take a risk because you need that body, you need that person, and you, in your mind, you can try to convince yourself that the risk outweighs the benefit, or the benefit outweighs the risk. And in the end, if your gut's screaming at you that it's not going to work out, 90 times out of 100, your gut's probably right?
Yeah, I would agree. And then on the other hand, I also learned to be patient with people. I mean, I think the CEOs are A-types. We go fast, we learn quick. Not everybody is the same that you bring in. We brought in somebody where in the beginning I really questioned the capability, the mental capability, and in the end it became our best customer service manager we had.